This here is a remarkable,
Welcome to the Wedding of Distinction podcast, a program for the unique bride and groom. The Wedding of Distinction is a concept where brides and grooms want something better. Not just your average wedding. We have the tools to make that happen. Now, here's your host, Mike Fernino.
Well, hello there, and welcome to my little humble abode on the internet. This is the Wedding of Distinction podcast. You know, they say that timing is everything, and just like any well-orchestrated event, a wedding reception requires a very good deal of pre-planning. If the timeline is not properly allocated, you will either have too much time left over, or you'll have to rush through everything and find yourself stressed. Now, where do you turn when you're trying to put everything together? And how do you make an effective wedding itinerary? Well, I would tell you, turn to the wedding professionals, as generally they're the people in the best position to advise you. The timing of your wedding day would probably be best served by listening to the photographer, because they're there for every single moment of your wedding from the very beginning right to the end. Well, at least most of them are. On the program today, I speak with our buddy John Munno of John Munno Weddings. As a professional photographer, John has worked with hundreds of couples, and he's in a very unique position to give quality advice and tell you the do's and the don'ts of a perfect wedding timeline. He graciously provides some of his time on today's program, so let's jump right in with both feet and talk timing today on the Wedding of Distinction podcast. So here we go. On the Zoom line today, I have our friend John Munno of John Munno Weddings, my neighbor from across the pond. How are you, John?
I'm doing good. Waiting for the sun to come out. I haven't seen it in about a month, I think, but it's there.
Yeah, but now, hold on a second. As a professional photographer, I thought overcast is good for photos.
It's good for photos, but not for every day.
Yeah, not for the suntan, right? John and I are going to talk today, or at least we're going to have John talk about proper wedding timelines, setting realistic goals. How much do you need? What's fluff? What to believe when the venue says, oh, you only need this and you only need that. We're going to take you from the beginning of the preparatory, getting ready, right down to the last dance. So what have you seen out there, John, as far as the timelines that you are given and what the expectations are from your bride and your groom?
You know, Mike, I see two scenarios. There's the first scenario, which is a lot easier to work with, which is a couple hires a photographer. You know, we're getting married. We need a photographer. And they don't really think about it. And all of a sudden they're like, well, how much time do we need? Do we need the 6 hour? Do we need the 8 hour? And they sit there and they kind of a little bit in a myth, or on these Facebook groups, there's brides, saying, well, how many hours is it going to be? This is what our wedding looks like. And that's easier to work with. It's the ones that are hard to work with that say, I want a 5 hour package. And then they go, we want this, 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 and this, and this. And it's going to take 8 hours, but they're convinced it's a 5 hour package. That's all they need. And that's harder to work with because it's not realistic.
Right. Well, I want to hit on one thing here, John. When brides, I'm going to say brides because usually it's not the grooms on the Facebook groups or the not chat channels there. But when you're getting advice from other brides that are planning a wedding, you are a novice getting advice from other novices. They don't know. They might have been in their girlfriend's wedding, but they speak from a platform of limited experience. And so listening to the people who do this for a living can be very beneficial. Would you agree?
Beyond agree. I see that all the time. It's like someone did one wedding and all of a sudden they're an expert, and they're giving advice out there. And then so many brides are like, oh, I'm going to listen to this person. And it's like, okay, well, you did one wedding. Well, I just did 40 this year, so yeah, you can't compare. And I wish more people would reach out to vendors. I mean, someone like you've been doing this for 40 years. I mean, how much experience is that? And it doesn't come with one wedding.
Don't tell anybody that. I tell my brides I have 30 plus years of experience. I stopped at 30. It's kind of like, when you turn 29, you stop counting.
I get it, but experience, it pays, and you can't, every year I get better, it's amazing because you just gain more experience, time management, skills, et cetera, et cetera.
Amen to that. So let's do a fictitious timeline, John. So use your imagination. This is really going to require imagination. I'm a bride. Hi, John. And I call you up and I say that my wedding is going to be 3 to 10. All right, the ceremony is going to be 4 o'clock. I'm getting married at the venue. And so 4 o'clock for the ceremony, and then the reception runs 5 to 10. We're going to arrive at 3, so we have an hour to prepare. What do you recommend? What do we need, and how do we properly manage that timeline?
So weddings, there's no cookie cutter to weddings. And that's what people don't understand. If somebody has a basic wedding, we'll talk about your example, which is a basic wedding where a ceremony begins at a certain time. It's going to be at the venue. Everything is at the venue. It's pretty realistic to say have 6 hours to fill from ceremony to the end of the wedding reception. The ceremony start time is not the start time for shooting. See, a lot of brides don't understand that. They're like, oh, our ceremony starts at 5 or 3. So what, you want me to show up at 3? And I've worked with second photographers where it's like, where are they? The ceremony's starting in 2 minutes and they're not here yet. So even if your ceremony starts at 3, your coverage starts at 2:30. So add another half an hour in there. But generally, ceremony to cocktail hour reception, 6 hours is pretty good for that type of a thing in one location. A lot of the weddings that I do portraits before the ceremony. I do first looks before the ceremony. I do getting ready shots of guys, getting ready shots of girls. So all of a sudden, this 6 hour timeline basically gets thrown out the window because you're looking at 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. I mean, I've done weddings, 16 hours of coverage. And that's what couples don't see. They just think I have a wedding, but you need to create space in a wedding to do things like bride prep, like groom prep, like let's do a first look, reading of vows, those kinds of things. And then it's pretty easy to get into the 8-10 hour mark when you start adding those things in before the ceremony.
But I'm glad you hit on that, John. If you could just really quickly define what a first look is, assuming that there are some couples that are listening to the podcast that don't really know what it is and would like to find out. This is a nice way to get your photos done and still be able to enjoy the cocktail hour and the rest of the wedding.
Totally, because it's a balance. If all you do is take photos at your wedding, you're not going to have fun. And if you just have fun, you don't have time to create the moments for photos. So it's this balance of creating time for photos, but at a certain point, we just want to have fun and you don't want any more photos. So a first look is a great way to do that because trying to squeeze all these photos into a cocktail hour, which is often not even an hour, doesn't give you a lot of subject matter, material, backgrounds, things like that. But if you can schedule a first look before the ceremony, the bride and groom can see each other. They can have this beautiful, intimate time to be with each other. And then that can segue right into doing portraits. So a lot of the weddings that I do, I actually finish all the portraits before the ceremony even begins. So that as soon as the ceremony begins, the rest of the wedding is just fun for them. They don't have to think about pictures. They can just enjoy. They can go to the cocktail hour. And a first look is a very good tool or opportunity, creating the space for something like that to happen regarding timelines.
Right. And you had mentioned how I've been doing this forever. I remember back in the 80s when I first got started as a DJ, the thing then was the bride and groom would show up from the church to the reception. They go right into this little side room because nobody was allowed to see the bride and groom. You couldn't, that would be taboo. And so they'd hide sometimes in these closet-sized rooms. The caterer would bring them some hors d'oeuvres and everything, and they'd freshen up in there, but they'd have to hide in there for the whole hour while the guests had cocktail hour. And the first look today really gives the bride and groom the opportunity to maximize their entire reception. So it's definitely a popular item.
It is. I mean, I had probably 70% of my weddings this year, I did first looks.
That's a big percentage right there. So I guess it's popular. So let's move on here now. So we talked about the timeline. And another thing I see a lot, John, I want to hit on as a professional DJ, I'm seeing this a lot where the photographer comes up to me. The wedding's going until 10, but the photographer says, I'm here, I'm booked until 7:30. And now we've had a timeline with the bride and groom. We're running a little bit late, let's say. And we have to move things up to accommodate the photographer because they didn't give the bride and groom a proper package. It's like selling a car without tires. Why would you hire your photographer for less than the full wedding day? At least that's my opinion. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, John, but when the photographer is not there for the last dance or something happens spontaneously during that last hour, everybody's dancing, having a great time, there's no photographer, something went wrong there, right?
I agree with you, Mike. And it's, I don't like to follow trends in a sense. I like to stick to my integrity and do what I feel is right and create my own trends. Okay. And it's interesting that you mentioned this because I don't think about this because a lot of my packages are full coverage. So I'm working from beginning of wedding to end of wedding in the majority of my packages. And it kind of it shocks me sometimes because I go to a wedding reception and the first thing I do is talk to the DJ because he's in charge of the reception. And I says, hi. The first question they ask me is, how late are you staying? Yep. And my answer is always the same. I'm staying to the end. And then they shake their heads, and they're like, what? They go, no photographers stay till the end anymore. And it kind of baffles me because I don't understand it either. And I don't know what these other studios are doing. And my only thought, and it could be wrong, is that there's this trend right now to have more and more photographers. It's like more is better. So let's have second photographers, and let's have third photographers, and let's have 3 videographers, and let's have assistants. And what's happening is weddings are turning into this big, huge production of people and production of costs. So I think a lot of it is couples are like, hey, well, it's going to cost me $3,000. So let's save some money. And the way they save money, because they're paying this photographer, that photographer, is they cut time off from the back of the wedding. And they're like, well, it's just dancing. Let's just cut some time off. So I think that's what's happening is that by trying to save costs, because there's all these people involved now, that they're cutting weddings shorter and shorter time to stay within a budget. With me, it's the opposite. I'm a single shooter. So I do all the weddings myself. And because they don't have to pay a ton of people, they can hire me for the whole day. And I actually get more shots than a second photographer because I'm there from the beginning to the end. And I'm allowed to capture more of their day and tell more of a story of it as a single photographer versus a second.
Right. It's just dancing, right? Nothing big. From my perspective, I think it really has to do with money. And I think what it is the photographers are creating packages, and the package will say up to 8 hours of coverage instead of full coverage and asking what they feel they deserve for full coverage. And so they give the bride and groom something that's less than full coverage because it meets their budget, or they're not willing to have prices in a certain level because they feel they're not going to get hired. So they'd rather do an incomplete event. But they tell the bride and groom, no, you're not going to be missing anything. It's just dancing. It's all the same at the end of the night. Well, I just did a wedding at the Water's Edge Resort down in Westbrook, and the photographer left at 7:30. Wedding went until 9:30, so there were 2 hours without the professional photographer there. During the last hour, the grandmother of the groom, it was all spontaneous. None of this was planned. The groom, she was in a wheelchair, and the groom came over, said, could you play this song? It was an old classic Frank Sinatra song. It was all spontaneous. They didn't plan this. It just kind of happened. And he took and he wheeled her around the dance floor. And everyone came out and got into this big circle. And it was an amazing moment. And as it's happening, I grabbed my phone because I realized photographer's not here. And it's just dancing, right? So I would have to disagree because when the photographer leaves, I'm still there. And I see all the wonderful moments that happen, some of them completely unplanned, and there's no professional there to capture those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And there's so much happening at a reception. some of them, like you said, some of the most amazing moments are towards the end and the last dance and this crescendo and everyone getting together and there's this celebration. And then you have photo booths going on. You have people outside, cigar shots. There's so many candid moments. And when you just leave, you leave all that behind. You don't have the opportunity to capture that because it's, some of the greatest shots I get are toward the end of the reception.
Or another one too, John, that happens that I see, and it could be a floor killer, is the staged ending. That's not really the ending. We're going to do a sparkler send-off. Now, the wedding goes to midnight, but the photographer is here till 11. So we're going to have everybody go out at 11 o'clock and do the sparkler send-off, and the bride and groom are going to come out and yay! And it's great. But then everyone is told, come back in. Well, we just shut the wedding down and stopped it, staged a goodbye. And I noticed not everybody comes back in. Many of them do head to their cars. So I think it's a wedding killer when you have to do something like that.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I think a lot of it is couples don't know. Like I get a lot of couples that contact me and they're like, we need a second photographer. We want to, and I go, well, what do you need a second photographer? And they go, well, we have guys getting ready and girls getting ready. And I go, well, I do it all the time. I just stagger the times. I just go do the guys because the girls' makeup takes a long time. And then I do the girls. So I think a lot of it is that people just don't understand. And the industry is pushing this. It's like the Knots pushing it. And everyone's saying you need this and you need that. So couples don't understand. And then even the photographers, they just want to sell the deal. So they're like, we'll just give you a second. Even if they don't even have one, they're like, well, we'll give you a second, So I think that's a part of it is couples don't know and the industry is pushing it. And it's hard for me to convince people sometimes that, hey, you don't need it. It takes a while sometimes.
So we both agree the photographer should stay to the end. We're definitely on that same page on that. What do you recommend a proper amount of time to allocate for a photo shoot during the wedding when the bride and groom want to, let's say, take pictures during the cocktail hour while the guests are having hors d'oeuvres? And also, what do you recommend as far as doing those wonderful sunset shots that we get in the summertime, as far as having that all planned out in the itinerary?
So I like to, as much as I can, do portraits before the ceremony. As much as I can, and I do it a lot because we have a lot of time then. We're not rushed, we're not pressured, and it frees up the cocktail hour to do what we want. So part of that freeing up for a cocktail hour will be, let's go do sunset photos. Let's break away and have this time to capture this beautiful moment, or let's even just get away, bride and groom, to be together. So if you do portraits before the ceremony, if you do a first look before the ceremony, it opens up more flexibility to do sunset photos at a cocktail hour, for example. Generally, if I do a first look, I recommend in portraits with a couple, I recommend an hour because it takes some time to get the groom set up and get the bride in position and all that. So usually I'll do an hour first look in portraits with the groom, followed by half an hour bridal party photos, and then half an hour family. So it's actually a 2-hour block of time for photos. But that gives more opportunity. It gives more creativity. It just allows, more beautiful photos than, say, rushing to try and get them into the cocktail hour. Because the 15 minutes before the reception starts, the bride and groom is taken away and put in the little room. Like you said, they line up with the DJ. So it's not even an hour of time. You're lucky sometimes if you have 45 minutes.
What do you think about taking photos during dinner time when the bride and groom are trying to eat their dinners, yet that's the peak, perfect spot for the sunset? What do you normally recommend with your brides and grooms to do? Do you stop, take those photos, or just let them have dinner?
I touch base with my couples a lot. Weddings are long days, and there's a lot happening, and everyone is different as far as their photo tolerance. Many people hire me as a photographer and go, I hate having my photo taken. So I was like, great, you hate having your photo taken, but you hired me. Cool. So I touch base with my couples a lot all throughout the day, and I check in with them and see where they're at, because everyone has a different tolerance. Everyone has a certain point where they said, I had enough. And I don't like to push people beyond that point, because it's their day. I want them to have a great time. Some couples are really into photos and they're like, hey, let's go out and get some photos. We'll do it. And then some couples are like, we had enough. We just want to dance and have fun. So for me, I just touch base with them, communicate, see where they're at. And I'll point it out. I'll say, hey, we got a really great sunset. Let's go out. You want to do that? And if they're like, no, okay, we won't do it. Because it's not, a lot of photographers, it's about like them getting an award, them getting a particular shot. And to me, it's not my wedding. It's my couple's weddings. So I don't push them to do things they don't want because it's something I want to do. And that's a little different. If they say no, it's no, because it's their wedding.
Amen to that. But we all know there's always influencers. And one of the biggest influencers is the wedding venue, the caterer. And they can tend to tell the bride and groom, well, this is going to happen here. This is going to happen here. This is going to happen here. Where do a bride and groom go to really get set straight as far as putting together a good itinerary? Is this something that they work with all their vendors? Do they just trust the catering facility? Or do they go to Facebook and listen to their friend?
It's important, venues, they have their own agendas too. They have 2 weddings going on. They're back to back. They have to get one in. They have to get one out. So venues have their own pressures or goals, whatever you call it. And they're not always about photos. They're like in the winter, receptions don't change time for dinner because there's no light. It's dinner time. We serve dinner because it's dinner time. And you're like, well, but it's in the dark. And so we paid all this money to go to this beautiful venue and it's in the dark and we have no time to take photos when there's light. Or venues will give brides restrictions like you can only arrive on property an hour before the ceremony. And then the bride says, oh, wow, we have an hour, but you don't because your guests are arriving 30 minutes early. So you have only 30 minutes now. And you want to do a first look and you want to do portraits and you want to do 2 hours of shooting in a half an hour time. So it's not realistic. It's just not a reality. So you can't always lean on venues. And sometimes the venues are like, oh, it's fine, but it's not fine. So you can't always lean on venues to give you the right information. In the winter, if I have a winter wedding, the first thing I do is what's the sunset? I look at those things. I have an ephemeris. I look at the time of the year. I look at the sunset. And then I'm like, oh, cool. This is not good. We have daylight saving ends. You're going to be in the dark. So we have to do all these portraits before the ceremony. And sometimes the venue won't let us on property. So we have to go to a park or we have to go to a different location. So the main thing is your photographer knows what they're doing. They should. Your photographer knows their timeline, how much time they need. So you should trust your photographer. A lot of photographers don't do this stuff. Like brides are asking these questions on these Facebook groups. And I'm like, well, talk to your photographer. And they're like, oh, he's a friend. Well, that's what you get.
I often joke around renaming our company and call us Friend of a Friend DJ Service because what do you have? Well, I've got a friend of a friend, Nothing irks the professionals more than, I can hear it in John's voice, we got a friend. That's the worst.
So here you're on this group asking advice from people that don't know anything because your photographer won't help you because you went cheap on your photographer. I lay out every one of my clients' timelines. I have sometimes 30, 40, 50 clients. Every single one of them, I meet with them before their wedding. I find out what they want their wedding vision to be like. I give them ideas. Based upon that, I lay out all their timelines for them so we can maximize the time. In the beginning, it was show up and shoot, in the beginning when I started doing this. And I'd be like, okay, why are we at this venue in the dark, and taking pictures in the parking lot? It's like, why are we on the party bus for an hour? Why is the makeup running an hour and a half into the portrait session when I'm supposed to be taking pictures of you? So over time, I realized that I need to step in because I know what I'm doing. Okay. And many of the couples I work with don't. So I help them. I lay out all their timelines. And the other thing I like to do is I like to create openings or create the spaces for magic to happen. So if you're like, oh, just take a couple of shots, this and that, I hear that from couples sometimes. It's like, well, we're not really creating the space for magic to happen. But if we do, let's say, bride prep, and we decide to create the space for a first look with the father, and the father comes into the room and he sees his daughter and he starts to cry and, becomes this an emotional thing. So we are creating the space for these emotions to happen, which translates into beautiful photos. First looks with mother and son, first looks with bride and groom, letter reading personal vows to each other. Most people don't think about this stuff. They're just like, oh, we're going to hire a photographer, and they're not going to include any of that. But what I do is I let all my couples know these are the different options for different parts of your wedding. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Yeah, I want to do a first look with my dad. And now the wedding gets transformed into just an amazing, emotional, beautiful moments that people cherish for a lifetime, and that just open up the heart and the space. And that only happens by creating that space.
So I'm glad that you had brought it up, because that's pretty much exactly where I was going with the whole thing with the venue, in my opinion. And I've watched it happen for many years. The venue, they're going to try to, should I use the word? Yeah, I'll use it. Manipulate the bride and groom to influence them. That's a better word. To kind of go along the pace that they want. With my company, Music in Motion, we actually have a timeline creating system in our online planning system that we have for our couples. And I work with all my couples, creating a timeline and going over their details, because I act as sort of the event director, not just the DJ. But that's not the norm. A lot of DJs, they show up, they play the music, they don't get involved in that aspect of things. So by and large, I think the photographer might be in the best possible position to give advice as far as time. So what you're talking about really makes a lot of sense.
And there's different factors in the play of the day. Like I'd say that from the ceremony on, the time is baked in. I say it's baked in because it's baked in by the venue. The venue says the ceremony is starting at this time. The venue reception is starting at this time. Cocktail hour is starting at this time. I don't have a lot of say in that at all. And I've been at weddings where people have mics on, walkie-talkies, the staff, and they're like, okay, photographer, you're done. So that part of the wedding, I don't have a lot of say of. And the DJ has, as I call the DJ, the coordinator for the reception. So he basically controls the timing for the reception. He knows we're going to start this. We're going to do the cocktail, not the cocktail. We're going to do the dance at this time. We're going to do the bouquet toss, whatever. The DJ is like the maestro of the reception for controlling that, and he will coordinate with the venue on that. The beginning of the wedding is where there's more flexibility. So I call it like Play-Doh. From the ceremony on is baked in. There's not a lot we can change. But in the beginning, it's like Play-Doh. And that's where I come in more to schedule, locations, to schedule first looks, to schedule portraits. That's kind of where I get to do, my little part to create these moments that wouldn't happen necessarily.
I like when you call me maestro. It makes me feel important. So in conclusion, to wrap it all up, John, what in your overall view of everything is the best way for a bride and groom to put together their timeline? Who do they turn to, and who is in the best position to give them advice? Is it a collective, or should they just work with their photographer on their timeline?
I would say work with your photographer, because every photographer does things different. And every photographer has, like, sometimes people say, oh, well, this person said it's only an hour. Well, that's that person, but I'm not that person. I know how much time I take. I know what time I need. So, for me, it's talking to your photographer, finding out what your needs are, and then letting them lay out the time that they need, because they do this all the time.
Yeah.
They know.
I would have to agree with you on that. So, John, tell the listeners of our podcast how they can get in contact with you. You are a frequent visitor of the program, but in case they didn't hear the previous episodes that we've done together, I'd recommend going back and finding them because those were excellent as well. But what's your contact information, John?
So my contact is John Munno Weddings. It's MUNNOWEDDINGS, johnmunnoweddings.com. And my phone number is 203-824-7423. On my website is a whole wedding planning section. So there is a wedding timeline on there that will help you decide how much time you need. So you can just put in the different times that you want. We want this, we want that, and it'll lay that out for you. So there's a lot of great resources on my website to help you figure out how much time you need for the wedding day.
And I would say John's a great resource, and I appreciate him being on the program. So, John, I'll hopefully be bumping into you at several weddings this year. And next time I see you, probably I'll be on the shore throwing rocks at you across the river.
That sounds great. I'm going to come and kayak over to see you.
Very nice. So, John, thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing you at the next wonderful Wedding of Distinction. I'm Mike Fernino. Thank you for the listen, everybody.
This here is a remarkable,
The Wedding of Distinction podcast is a production of Music in Motion Entertainment. All rights reserved. Any unauthorized publication of this program is strictly prohibited. For the Wedding of Distinction podcast, I'm Mike Vincent. Happy wedding planning, everybody.
Come on.